Hello students, in this class we will learn something about the contents of ICESCR. We will start with introduction, then parts and main provisions of ICESCR in brief. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, covers a very wide spectrum of rights like the right to work, right to just and favorable conditions of work, right to form trade unions, right to social security, right to protection and assistance to family, right to adequate standard of living, right to health, right to education for everyone, right to enjoy cultural life to everyone, benefits of scientific progress and protection of scientific, literary or artistic production. State parties to the ICESCR have an obligation to ensure the implementation of core rights of the ICESCR. The Covenant follows the structure of the UDHR and ICCPR with a preamble and 31 articles divided into 5 parts. Part 1, Article 1 recognizes the right of all people to self-determination, including the right to freely determine their political status, pursue their economic, social and cultural goals, and manage and dispose of their own resources. It recognizes a negative right of a people not to be deprived of its means of subsistence and imposes an obligation on those parties still responsible for non-self-governing and trust territories or colonies to encourage and respect their self-determination. Part 2, Articles 2 to 5 establish the principle of progressive realization. It also requires the rights to be recognized without discrimination of any kind as to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. The rights can only be limited by law in a manner compatible with the nature of the rights and only for the purpose of promoting the general welfare in a democratic society. Part 3, Articles 6 to 15 list the rights themselves. These include right to work under just and favorable conditions, with the right to form and join trade unions, social security including social insurance, family life including paid parental leave and the protection of children, an adequate standard of living including adequate food, clothing and housing, and the continuous improvement of living conditions. Then health, specifically the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Education including free, universal primary education, generally available secondary education and equally accessible higher education. This should be directed to the full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity and enable all persons to participate effectively in society. Then participation in cultural life. Many of these rights include specific actions which must be undertaken to realize them. Part 4, Articles 16 to 25 governs reporting and monitoring of the covenant and the steps taken by the parties to implement it. It also allows the monitoring body, originally the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and now the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, to make general recommendations to the UN General Assembly on appropriate measures to realize the rights. Part 5, Articles 26 to 31 govern ratification, entry into force and amendment of the covenant. The optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is a side agreement to the covenant which allows its parties to recognize the competence of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights to consider complaints from individuals. The optional protocol was adopted by the UN General Assembly on 10th December 2008. It was opened for signature on 24th September 2009, and as of May 2012 has been signed by 40 parties and ratified by 8. It will enter into force when ratified by 10 parties. The state party to the ICESCR has an obligation to ensure the implementation of core rights of the ICESCR. The Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights has employed a typology of state party obligations to facilitate understanding with regard to the fulfillment of economic, social and cultural rights. Under this model, state parties should respect, protect and fulfill the rights embodied in the ICESCR. Now about the principle of progressive realization. Article 2 of the Covenant imposes a duty on all parties to take steps to the maximum of its available resources with a view to achieving progressively the full realization of the rights recognized in the present covenant by all appropriate means, including the adoption of legislative measures. This is known as the principle of progressive realization. It acknowledges that some of the rights, for example, right to health, may be difficult in practice to achieve in a short period of time, and that states may be subject to resource constraints but requires them to act as best they can within their means. Then I am coming to labor rights. Right to work, equal pay for equal work. Article 6 of the Covenant recognizes the right to work, defined as the opportunity of everyone to gain their living by freely chosen or accepted work. Parties are required to take appropriate steps to safeguard this right, including technical and vocational training and economic policies aimed at steady economic development and ultimately full employment. The work referred in Article 6 must be decent work. This is effectively defined by Article 7 of the Covenant, which recognizes the right of everyone to just and favorable working conditions. These are in turn defined as fair wages with equal pay for equal work, sufficient to provide a decent living for workers and their dependents, safe working conditions, equal opportunity in the workplace, and sufficient rest and leisure, including limited working hours and regular paid holidays. Article 8 recognizes the right of workers to form or join trade unions and protects the right to strike. It allows these rights to be restricted for members of the armed forces, police, or government administrators. Next right is right to social security. Social security and social insurance. Article 9 of the Covenant recognizes the right of everyone to social security, including social insurance. It requires parties to provide some form of social insurance scheme to protect people against the risk of sickness, disability, maternity, employment injury, unemployment, or old age, to provide for survivors, orphans, and those who cannot afford health care, and to ensure that families are adequately supported. Next, I am coming to the right to family life, which includes children's rights, fathers' rights, and reproductive rights. Article 10 of the Covenant recognizes the family as the natural and fundamental group unit of society and requires parties to accord it the widest possible protection and assistance. Parties must take special measures to protect children from economic and social exploitation, including setting a minimum age of employment and barring children from dangerous and harmful occupations. Next right is a right to an adequate standard of living, which includes right to food, right to water, right to housing, and right to clothing. Article 11 recognizes the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living. This includes the right to adequate food, clothing, housing, and the continuous improvement of living conditions. It also creates an obligation on the parties to work together to eliminate world hunger. Next right is right to health. Article 12 of the Covenant recognizes the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Health is understood not just as a right to be healthy, but as a right to control one's own health and body, including reproduction, and be free from interference such as torture or other medical experimentation. State must protect this right by ensuring that everyone within their jurisdiction has access to the underlying detriments of health such as clean water, sanitation, food, nutrition and housing. Article 12.2 requires parties to take specific steps to improve the health of their citizens, including reducing infant mortality and improving child health, improving environmental and workplace health, preventing, controlling and treating epidemic diseases and creating conditions to ensure equal and timely access to medical services for all. Next, right to free education. Article 13 of the Covenant recognizes the right of everyone to free education, free for the primary level and the progressive introduction of free education for the secondary and higher levels. This is to be directed towards the full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity and enable all persons to participate effectively in society. Education is seen both as a human right and as an indispensable means of realizing other human rights, and so this is one of the longest and most important articles of the Covenant. Article 13.2 lists a number of specific steps which the parties are required to pursue to realize the right of education. These include the provision of free, universal and compulsory primary education, generally available and accessible secondary education in various forms including technical and vocational training, and equally accessible higher education. Article 13.3 and 13.4 requires parties to respect the educational freedom of parents by allowing them to choose and establish private educational institutions for their children, also referred to as freedom of education. It also recognizes the right of parents to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions. This is interpreted as requiring public schools to respect the freedom of religion and conscience of their students, and as forbidding instruction in a particular religion or belief system unless non-discriminatory exemptions and alternatives are available. Article 14 of the Covenant requires those parties which have not yet established a system of free, compulsory primary education to rapidly adopt a detailed plan of action for its introduction within a reasonable number of years. Next is the right to participation in cultural life, which includes right to science and culture, right to development, right to public participation. Article 15 of the Covenant recognizes the right of everyone to participate in cultural life, enjoy the benefits of scientific progress, and to benefit from the protection of the moral and material rights to any scientific discovery or artistic work they have created. The latter clause is sometimes seen as requiring the protection of intellectual property, but the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights interprets it as primarily protecting the moral rights of authors and proclaiming The intrinsically personal character of every creation of the human mind and the ensuring durable link between creators and their creations. It thus requires parties to respect the right of authors to be recognized as the creator of a work. The material rights are interpreted as being part of the right to an adequate standard of living and need not extend over the entire lifespan of an author. Parties must also work to promote the conservation, development, and diffusion of science and culture, respect the freedom indispensable for scientific research and creative activity, and encourage international contacts and cooperation in these fields. The central obligation in relation to the ICSCR is for states parties to give effect to the rights recognized in the ICSCR. The state parties are required to do so by all appropriate means. However, the ICSCR adopts a broad and flexible approach which enables the particularities of the legal and administrative system of each state, as well as other relevant considerations to be taken into account.